Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome back to the public policy analysis class. This is the 15th lecture of the series, and as you would have guessed by now, that now we are into the more technical side of the stuff, and this is hopefully you are getting along with it. You are understanding what I am trying to say, what I am trying to get at you. I have tried to make it as easy as possible for you. Hopefully you wouldn't have had a problem with what we've covered till now. So we'll be continuing on with what we have been doing in the previous lecture. In the previous lecture we continued with the examples of the internal rate of return and its applications. Then we also took some examples of the everyday examples that can be applied to it. One was economic shortage and the effect of regulation in pharmaceutical industry, how we tried to gauge the economic shortages by internal rate of returns, and what the internal rate of returns said about the effects of regulation, the government regulation, on the pharmaceutical industry. Their point of view was that it's going to hurt the investment prospects in the pharmaceutical industry, which will obviously make it unreliable, make it a bad attraction for investors, and that would cause the pharmaceuticals to wrap up things over there in the US and move to other countries. But as we saw in that lecture, as we went through in the previous lecture, that somebody was calculating the internal rate of returns, which is a yardstick. Again, remember, this is a yardstick for measuring the attractiveness of a certain investment prospect or an investment project. So what they were doing over there was that they were tracking the internal rate of returns, and what they found was that the internal rate of returns haven't decreased due to regulations. In fact, they have stayed the same or increased, which meant that they are still very good attraction as far as investment is concerned. So their misgivings about regulations hampering the industry or causing damage to the industry, most of them were unfound. Anyway, then the economic shortages, again, keep tracking the internal rate of returns, and that could be pointed to the shortages of a certain commodity, certain product. They are indicated to it. So internal rate of return has its uses. One needs to know how to use them. After that, we went through the basics of market economy. The working of a market economy, we went through that in a lecture. In the previous lecture, our laissez-faire or market economy tends to work with where competition is prevalent, and what a perfect competition model pretty much looks like, and then the simple demand and supply analysis. I drew diagrams of demand curve, how a demand curve is formed. Then I drew some the supply curve, how a supply curve is formed, and we learned that the demand curve is downward sloping because there is a negative relationship between price and quantity. As the price increases, we would expect the quantity demanded to decrease. On the other side, when we were discussing the supply curve, which is upward sloping, that is due to the reason that when the price goes up, the quantity supplied goes up too. It's an incentive to increase production, so the quantity increases too. So there is a positive relationship which is reflected in the positive slope or the upward slope of the supply curve. And after that, one of the things that we encountered or we studied was how the disequilibrium is created, how a disequilibrium comes about. We saw a picture, we saw a graph of an equilibrium with a price and a certain quantity where demand and supply meet. Now remember, the equilibrium takes place where demand and supply cross. That, as I explained, it could be the price where consumer would be happy to buy the product, although he might want to have the price to be lesser, but he's also aware that the producer has to get something, and the producer is also happy that this is the price I'm getting for my product, although he might want the price to be above that. But we will see that this attempt at higher prices or lower prices, it causes a disequilibrium which is not in anybody's interest. I gave then in a short, in a short depiction, in just a short graph, not a very good drawing, I remember. I'm not very good at it, honestly. But anyway, I drew some the basic supply and demand curve and showed you how consumer and producer surplus that we are going to study in the future, and we are going to discuss a lot in the future. It is reflected in those triangles, that one is above the equilibrium price line and one is below the equilibrium price line. These are consumer and producer surpluses, and why they are known as surpluses, why they are called surpluses, why not just surplus for why not just by any other name. And then I drew something about the short run curve. I remember that I said that this is the short run fluctuation where supply curve shifted back, and as a result, what happened was that the demand, the shift in supply curve caused the price to increase because the demand was the same, remember, but what happened to supply curve was that there was a negative shock. The supply, that is reflected in the backward or the left shift of the supply curve, which meets the demand curve somewhere higher, with an implication, graphically at least, and logically it is that the price would increase because the demand is the same but the quantity supplied has decreased. There is the same demand, there are same number of people demanding that same thing, but the supply has increased, so the natural outcome would be that the price would rise because supply doesn't meet the demand. With a higher price, you would expect that the demand to decrease. Graphically it does, in the real world it might not, it does to varying degrees. Remember over here, another thing, I think I didn't discuss it in the last lecture, I think this is a very appropriate forum, very appropriate place to discuss it, is that there are certain assumptions. They are known as ceteris paribus assumptions. Again, those who have taken economics have already those who have taken economics are already aware of this ceteris paribus assumption, which says that let everything remaining the same. So over here, when we are doing this simple graphical analysis, what is happening over here is that we are taking many things as constant, saying that look, this is just for the moment, just consider these things constant and we'll consider only one thing, like a price increase. We are not considering the increase in population, the increase in other, the change in tastes or some stuff like that. No, we are not considering that. We are just considering one variable. Now, this is a pretty limiting condition, but this is how graphical analysis is done for simplicity, at least for the beginners. So the ceteris paribus assumption assures that this demand curve is downward sloping, supply curve is upward sloping, and as supply decreases, as demand increases, what happens with demand and supply curve, where do they shift, and as price increases, the demand would quantity demanded would come down. That all owes to this ceteris paribus assumption and general observations that were made before drawing of the demand curve. So, but we also saw what happened when equilibrium is disturbed. So perhaps this is the right time, perhaps this is the place where I should go through again what happens in the short run and what happens in the long run when the production of that product increases as more investors pour in. So yes, this would be the right place for me to draw this kind of stuff. There's a place over here, and since it is a continuation of the previous lectures, so let me draw it over here, so in the discussion of the previous lecture. So here we go. Let's just start with again the simple demand and supply stuff that was drawn over there. sorry again, but not very good at this stuff, just making you understand this stuff. So this is the supply curve, this is the demand curve, downward sloping one. Here it is that we have reached an equilibrium. There you go. This would be the quantity demanded. From here, as it meets the horizontal curve, this would be the price. This point, let us say this is E point, which if you remember in the last lecture in which one of the graphs was there, this was the equilibrium point where this is the equilibrium price P and this is the equilibrium quantity Q. So now this is the equilibrium, right? So we are in a situation of equilibrium. But what happens when there is a negative supply shock or the supply of a commodity decreases? This is in the short run. So let's just draw the lines again, the horizontal and the vertical. This is the horizontal and then the other one is the vertical one. Again the demand curve, then the supply curve, upward sloping. Here you have your equilibrium as in the previous one, the equilibrium price and quantity. Now there is a shock in the form of reduction in the supply of a specific commodity. So that is shown, as you would remember from a previous lecture, what that is shown over here is like this. The supply curve has shifted over here. Supply curve has shifted back. Now watch remember where the supply curve meets the demand curve. Over here. This is our original demand curve. The new supply curve meets it over here. So the new price, if you extend it to the vertical axis, it would be over here. And then if you extend this over here, this would be your new quantity demanded. First thing that happens is when there is a shift in supply curve is that it shifts backwards. It meets the original demand curve, the new supply curve. It meets the original demand curve over at this point, which we should call equilibrium 1. This is the new equilibrium point. But the price is much higher. It's P1 now. Price goes up. After the price goes up, you see that the demand decreases. Demand for the quantity decreases, and that is shown over here by a movement towards this side from the original Q to, let's say, Q1. So this is what happens in the short run. What happens over here is, or what is happening over here is that with this exogenous shock, when the supply curve moves backward, the price increases because demanders are same, but there is less quantity. The natural result is a higher price, and as price goes up, the logical next step is that follows is that the quantity demanded decreases because at the higher price, not everybody is able to buy that product. What happens from an investor or producer point of view is that as the price goes up, the profitability of the product A also goes up. Now as the profitability of this product A goes up, what happens is that its internal rate of return also goes up. And again, recall what I said in the last lecture is that as the profitability goes up, it implies that the future income stream, the future income, projected income, it also goes up. As that goes up, obviously, naturally the value, the internal rate of return or the discounted values, the present values would also go up. So it would make it the product A, in this case, in the short run where there has been a negative supply shock, it would make for a good investment. So we are expecting, what we are expecting over here is, according to the market principles, what we are expecting over here is that investors would rush in, the producers would come to this side because there is now a higher internal rate of return over here in this product, and they can garner more profits from it. So this is what happens in the short run, that as the price increases, the demand decreases, but the price increase induces more people to come in. This is the short run. Now let's see what happens in the very long run. In the short run, they'd be making a lot of profits, the ones who are already there. That would mean that other producers would also come in because of the profitability. In the long run, what would happen over here is that the demand curve, the supply curve, it would move back again over to the same place. So suppose, let's come over here. Yes, here you go. Let's draw the y and x axis again. You have this demand curve falling down, you have the supply curve going up. So suppose this is the new equilibrium, the ones that, in fact, that was the original equilibrium. So and this was the new equilibrium which was established after the supply curve moved outward or backward. The new price and the new quantity demanded. This is the original one, and this is the original quantity. This is what was happening in the short run, this one, that the supply curve shifted back, as I just mentioned. Now in the long run, when there are many more producers over here enter this industry, enter this production of product A, then there would be more production and there would be more of product A, and we would expect that it would gradually come down to the position where it was. So in the long run, what is happening is a reverse of what is happening in the short run, the picture just before that, the graph before that. So over here, as supply increases, it would be a rightward shift of the supply curve. It would come back over this point where it meets the demand curve again over here. At this point, the price comes back down over here to its original price, and the quantity demanded would also increase as the price goes down and would be back to its equilibrium level. This is what we expect to happen in a perfect competition. In an economy where there are no entry barriers, there are no monopolies, and a producer can easily enter and easily go back, easily leave an industry. So what would you expect now when things are back to normal, when they are back to the equilibrium price? Think about it. What would you expect to internal rate of return? What would happen to investors? Think about it. Take 5 seconds and be back. So hopefully you've thought about it and you've guessed the answer. I'm sure most of you have. If you have been listening, if you have been watching carefully, you've been listening carefully, it's not a puzzle at all. What would happen is that as the prices decrease, the internal rate of return also decreases. It's not that profitable an investment anymore when it comes back to its original level or the equilibrium level in the long run. But mind you, over here, remember one point. Does that necessarily mean that the investor who has invested his money, or the producer who has invested his time over here and money over here in production of this product, would leave as the internal rate of return comes down? Not necessarily. It a lot depends upon what kind of investment option does the investor have over here. Is there an investment with an internal rate of return greater than this one of product A, or is it the fact that despite the internal rate of return coming down a little bit, it is still more feasible, it is still more than what is being offered by alternative investment? So a lot depends upon the comparisons of internal rate of returns. Even when the internal rate of return in the long run comes down, as we've just depicted in the graph, you would expect the investor not just to pack up his bags and leave. He would be making a comparison of alternative investments through the internal rate of return and see whether this industry is still profitable, this investment option is still profitable, or should I move to another industry? So this is how this thing works in the short run and the long run, this equilibrium process, this coming back to a certain point, this entry, this leaving, this change in internal rate of return. So hopefully you would have understood it by now, It is very clear to you now. As I said, for those who have already taken economics, this is a child's game. This is not difficult to fathom at all. But perhaps there are many people, perhaps there are many students who haven't taken this course, who haven't taken economics. So there was need to clarify this thing so that we can then move ahead. So hopefully by now you've understood this thing. All right, we are all done with this simple analysis, graphical analysis, and it is perhaps time to remind you that we did another thing besides this one, and that was the introduction of consumer and producer surplus and those triangles in this demand and supply analysis, in this demand and supply diagram, which shows that part of consumer surplus in a triangle and part of producer surplus in a triangle. So you need to remember that, because we'll be going over that stuff again and again. It's very important in terms of public policy and in terms of public policy analysis. So make an effort to understand that. Let's move towards today's lecture. That would be, so before we move very further on graphical stuff, it is very important to go through the rationale of government's involvement in an economy. So there you go. For some time now, for some moments now, you wouldn't be dealing with all this technical stuff, so I'm sure you'd be pretty happy. I'm happy too. So anyway, let's go ahead with it. Free market advocates do not like government's presence in the economy. जो free market advocates हैं, ये एक नाम जिनका है libertarians, वो ये कहते हैं कि हुकूमत की कोई इन्वॉल्वमेंट सिरे से इक्तिसादी उमूर में होनी ही नहीं चाहिए, क्योंकि उसका नुकसान बहुत है, फ़ायदा कम है. That is the point. That is one of the extreme points. जिस तरह हर आपको शोबा है ज़िंदगी में एक ऐसा तबका मिल जाएगा जिसका बिल्कुल एक एक्सट्रीम पॉइंट है, कोई दरमियाना रास्ता नहीं है. इस तरह लिबर्टेरियंस भी जो है उनका एक एक्सट्रीम पॉइंट है, उनकी एक एक्सट्रीम सोच है. वो ये है कि हुकूमत की बिल्कुल कोई प्रेजेंस ही ना हो इकोनॉमी में, बिल्कुल मुदाखलत ही ना हो इकोनॉमी में. That is what the point of view is. Anyway, we'll see. We'll discuss whether it's good or not. They believe in the working of the price mechanism, a mechanism through which prices in an economy allocate resources. They are the signals that guide resource allocation. अब देखें प्राइस मैकेनिज्म है ये, जिस तरह बात करते हैं फ्री मार्केट इकोनॉमिस्ट जो होते हैं. अब फ्री मार्केट इकोनॉमिस्ट और लिबरल्स में थोड़ा सा डिफरेंस है. फ्री मार्केट इकोनॉमिस्ट जो होते हैं वो इतने हॉकिश नहीं होते, इतने ज़्यादा एक्सट्रीम एक व्यू नहीं लेते, लेकिन उनका व्यू ये है कि प्राइस मैकेनिज्म जो होता है इकोनॉमी में, जो कीमत का मैकेनिज्म होता है, ये कीमत होती है, वो एक बहुत बड़ा पॉइंटर होती है. कीमत जो है वो रिसोर्स एलोकेशन, कि रिसोर्स किधर जाना चाहिए, इन्वेस्टमेंट किधर जानी चाहिए, सेविंग किस तरफ जानी चाहिए, वो उसका तयन जो होता है वो कीमत करती है किसी भी इक्तिसादी उसमें, किसी भी मुल्क में, उसकी इक्तिसादियात में. Price is the guiding principle of the allocation of resources. Prices are like signals that guide resources, that guide investors, that guide savers, that guide producers, that guide consumers of what to do, how to behave. So this is the price mechanism, and it's very basics, that the price is the one that will dictate what happens and what doesn't happen, and what route should a person, anybody should take. Government's involvement, they say, can only distort the price allocation mechanism and thus introduce unwanted distortions in the smooth functioning of an economy. So उनका ख्याल ये है कि जो ये प्राइस मैकेनिज्म है, यानी कीमत जो हर चीज़ का तयन कर रही है या एक इंडिकेशन दे रही है कि रिसोर्सेज या वसाइल किस तरफ जाने चाहिए, वो मैकेनिज्म बड़ा ठीक ठाक काम करता है. लेकिन हुकूमत जब उसमें इन्वॉल्वमेंट करती है, उसमें जब टांग अड़ाने की कोशिश करती है, तो वो मैकेनिज्म ख़राब हो जाता है, उसमें मसला पैदा हो जाता है. अब हाउ डज दिस वर्क, यू माइट वंडर. रिमेंबर, रिकॉल, वी जस्ट वेंट थ्रू एन एग्जांपल. अभी हमने एक मिसाल की कि प्रोडक्ट ए जो है, जब उसकी कीमत इंक्रीज हो जाती है, जिसकी कीमत बढ़ जाती है, तो देखिए वो जो इन्वेस्टर है वो उसके लिए एक सिग्नल होता है कि इस चीज़ की कीमत ज़्यादा है, इसका इंटरनल रेट ऑफ रिटर्न ज़्यादा है, तो इस तरफ जाएं. तो इन्वेस्टर जो है वो इस तरफ जाएगा, और फिर लॉन्ग रन में मैंने बताया कि उसकी जब इंटरनल रेट ऑफ रिटर्न कम हो जाएगी, कीमत वापस आ जाएगी, तो फिर हम क्या एक्सपेक्ट कर सकते हैं. सो देखिए ये कीमत जो है ये इस चीज़ का तयन कर रही है कि इन्वेस्टर किधर जा रहा है, जिस जो हमने अभी मिसाल पढ़ी. सो प्राइस इज अ गाइडिंग मैकेनिज्म. However, over time, government has remained as a part and parcel of economic activity. There are many advocates from all backgrounds who advocate government's active involvement in economic affairs. जो एक हमने शुरू के लेक्चर्स थे उसमें एक बात जो हमने डिस्कस की थी पब्लिक पॉलिसी के बारे में कि ये अरस्तु वगैरह के ज़माने से ये चीज़ चली आ रही है, सुकरात वगैरह के ज़माने से, वो पब्लिक पॉलिसी की डिबेट। इसी तरह देखें जो उनकी डिबेट्स हैं उसमें इकोनॉमिक्स भी थी कि हुकूमत का क्या रोल होना चाहिए। अरस्तु वगैरह और सुकरात वगैरह की डिबेट्स में इकोनॉमिक्स भी थी कि इक्तिसादी तौर पर हुकूमत को क्या करना चाहिए। सो हुकूमत की जो इन्वॉल्वमेंट है वो उस वक्त से चली आ रही है, नॉन टाइम से, टिल वी नो दैट रिटन रिकॉर्ड एग्जिस्ट। उससे पहले भी जो बहुत ही शुरू की सिविलाइजेशंस थी, शुरुआत थी, जो हमें मतलब पता चलता है रिकॉर्ड से 3000 साल पहले की, बाबल वगैरह में, इराक में, निनवा में, उसमें भी जो जितनी हुकूमतें थी जो अभी तक उसके सबूत शवाहिद सामने आए हैं, उसमें यही है कि हुकूमत जो थी जो यहाँ वहाँ पे हुकूमत करता था, बादशाह था, जो भी था, शहजादा था, उनकी बड़ी इन्वॉल्वमेंट होती थी हुकूमत की इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटी में। तफसील में जाने की ज़रूरत नहीं है, वरना मैं आपको ज़रूर बताता। दिस इज़ अ वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग सब्जेक्ट विच इज़ वेरी क्लोज टू माई हार्ट, इकोनॉमिक हिस्ट्री। इट्स वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग, बट suffice to say, recorded history of our economic affairs tells us that government has always been there, for good or for bad, but it's always been there. It has had its presence since the time known, since the earliest record exists. So I'll say get used to it if you like it or not. There are many advocates from all backgrounds who advocate government's active involvement in economic affairs. जिस तरह लिबर्टेरियंस है जो कि मुखालफीन है इस चीज़ के कि हुकूमत की कोई भी हुकूमत की एक्टिविटी होनी चाहिए या हुकूमत की इन्वॉल्वमेंट होनी चाहिए इक्तिसादी उमूर में, इसी तरह बहुत से लोग हैं हर शोबा ज़िंदगी से, फ़िलासफ़ी से हो गए, रिसर्च वगैरह से हो गए, किसी भी फील्ड की, उनमें से बहुत सौ का नज़रिया यह है कि हुकूमत की कोई ना कोई इन्वॉल्वमेंट होनी चाहिए इकॉनमी में, ज़रूर होनी चाहिए। आई एम वन ऑफ दीज, लेट मी कन्फेस कि मैं समझता हूँ कि हुकूमत एक अच्छा रोल प्ले कर सकती है, पॉजिटिव रोल प्ले कर सकती है, अगर नीयत साफ हो, नीयत अच्छी हो। सारा मसला यहाँ पे नीयत होगा, वरना गवर्नमेंट कैन डू अ लॉट ऑफ गुड थिंग्स। Today we are going to study the major reasons of why a government has a role to play in the economic affairs of a country. This would be a very limited discussion. I'm not going in the very nitty-gritties of it. No, it's not necessary for this course. इसकी ज़रूरत नहीं है इस कोर्स में बहुत ज़्यादा तफसील में, लेकिन मैं ये करूँगा कि आपको जो होमवर्क्स हैं या जो असाइनमेंट्स हैं उनमें मैं आपको एक आर्टिकल, एक पेपर उसमें अटैच कर दूँगा पढ़ने के लिए। मोस्ट प्रॉब्ली जोसेफ स्टिग्लिट्स का ही होगा, जो एक नोबेल प्राइज विनर है इकोनॉमिक्स का। उसने लिखा होता है गवर्नमेंट फेलियर और मार्केट फेलियर के बारे में। उसमें दोनों किस्म के फेलियर उसने डिस्कस किए हुए थे, लेकिन ज़्यादातर उसने मार्केट फेलियर डिस्कस किया था। सो टुडे वी आर गोइंग टू स्टडी द मेजर रीजंस व्हाई गवर्नमेंट हैज़ अ रोल टू प्ले इन इकोनॉमिक अफेयर्स ऑफ कंट्री। द फॉलोइंग हैज़ बीन टेकन फ्रॉम वेरियस सोर्सेज, इंक्लूडिंग एन आर्टिकल ऑन मार्केट फेलियर्स बाय जोसेफ स्टिग्लिट्स, नोबेल प्राइज विनिंग इकोनॉमिस्ट। अच्छा देखें, अब उसमें जोसेफ स्टिग्लिट्स के अलावा और भी बहुत से सोर्सेज हैं। जोसेफ स्टिग्लिट्स ने ज़ाहिर है उसने बहुत काम किया इस सिलसिले में, and he is a proactive advocate of government's intervention in the economy to help level the playing field, to help give a boost to the economic activity. So Joseph Stiglitz is kind of an advocate of this thing. First of all, conventional market failures rests upon few very basic narrow assumptions like perfect competition, perfect access to information and rationality. What rests upon these assumptions is the perfect functioning of a market or the laissez-faire market, let it be market, जो कि अभी हमने बात की थी. These rest upon very few assumptions. इसमें कुछ बड़ी एक restricted किस्म की assumptions है जो हम अपने आप से assume करते हैं. उसमें ये assume करते हैं कि जी कंपटीशन परफेक्ट कंपटीशन है, यानी कोई इजारादारी मोनोपोली वगैरह नहीं है, विच कोई भी स्टूडेंट ऑफ इकोनॉमिक्स जो है वो आपको ये बता देगा कि ये गलत है, क्योंकि इजारादारियाँ मोनोपलीज जो हैं वो बहुत हैं, पाकिस्तान में अच्छी खासी हैं। OGDCL होगी, ये एक पूरी इजारादारी है, इट्स अ मोनोपली। सिमिलरली रेलवेज इज अ मोनोपली। देखिए इट्स जो कि इजारादार हैं वो खुद कीमतों का तयन करती हैं, हुकूमत करती है तयन, हुकूमत भी इस सिलसिले में फिर उसकी भी इजारादारी है कि वही कई कीमतों का तयन करती है, रेलवे के फेयर्स क्या होंगे, गैस किस कीमत पे बिकेगी। सो इट्स नॉट द मार्केट मैकेनिज्म, प्राइस मैकेनिज्म वर्किंग ओवर है, इन फैक्ट इट्स द गवर्नमेंट्स इंटरवेंशन in the economy that is happening. Perfect access to information, लोगों के पास मुकम्मल तौर पे मालूमात होती है। I am sure कि कोई भी इस चीज़ से इत्तेफाक नहीं करेगा, ना मैं करूँगा ना आप लोग करेंगे, कोई भी यहाँ पे नहीं करेगा। अगर यहाँ पे मुकम्मल इंफॉर्मेशन होती, इस तरह की ट्रांसपेरेंसी होती, तो फिर हमारे इतने मसले भी ना होते। And rationality, we remember we discussed rationality on being rational in one of the starting lectures. What that I said at that time was that being rational doesn't mean that you take everything like a computer and decide everything logically and perfectly. Being rational means that given your history, what you've learned, you have some expectations of what a good behavior or what the right decision would be, and you make a decision according to it. Being rational, that is. But of course people can be irrational. However, research over time has shown that markets in many forms may be incomplete, monopolistic, and without perfect information. There are not many who believe in perfectly well functioning markets today. To be sure, there are examples of badly designed government regulations, but the disasters associated with unfettered markets at least provide a prima facie case for desirability of some regulation. देखिए जहाँ तक हुकूमत की बात है तो let us stick with our country, Pakistan. We know that the governments over time haven't been very sincere, and they have tried to take care of their interests first, and maybe perhaps people come afterwards. We know that. In those terms, it has been a failure. Yes, it has been a failure. But there have been disasters also associated with private markets. अब प्राइवेट सेक्टर जो पाकिस्तान में है उसका मसला ये है कि वो एक गवर्नमेंट के मुकाबले में काफ़ी छोटा है। मतलब वो चीज़ें, उन चीज़ों पे वो दस्तरस नहीं रखता उतने वसाइल पे जितना कि गवर्नमेंट सेक्टर के होते हैं। जो गवर्नमेंट सेक्टर के जितने वसाइल हैं, वो उसको मैच नहीं करते प्राइवेट सेक्टर के जो वसाइल हैं। इस वजह से बहुत से फंक्शन ऐसे होते हैं कि जो प्राइवेट सेक्टर परफॉर्म नहीं कर सकता। अगर गवर्नमेंट उनमें से हाथ उठा ले तो फिर बड़ा मसला बन जाएगा, एक वॉइड क्रिएट हो जाएगा। मिसाल मैं आपको देता हूँ, लेट अस टेक एन एग्जांपल, सोशल वेलफेयर ट्रांसफर, मैंने इनकम सपोर्ट की बात की थी। ओनली गवर्नमेंट कैन डू दैट एट दिस मोमेंट। ज़कात एंड नुशर एंड इनकम सपोर्ट प्रोग्राम्स, दे combined I think cost around more than 90 billion rupees a year. Now so this is kind of a transfer from wealthy and middle class that the government has in taxes, that the government takes in taxes, and then transfers it to the poor people. We are hoping that they are deserving, and hopefully they are. So this kind of transfer, 90 billion rupees per year, 85 अरब रुपए, 90 अरब रुपए, ये प्राइवेट सेक्टर की बस की बात नहीं है, एटलीस्ट पाकिस्तान में मुझे पता है। एंड दे वोंट बी एबल टू डू इट। मेरा नहीं ख्याल वो कर सकेंगे। विल है, नहीं है, चाहते हैं करना, नहीं करना चाहते, ये एक अलग बात है। लेकिन इतना अंदाज़ा है काम करके हमें जो अंदाज़ा हुआ कि प्राइवेट सेक्टर जो है इट्स नॉट अप टू द मार्क इन दिस केस। सो द गवर्नमेंट बाय डिफॉल्ट हैज़ टू स्टेप इन दीज केसेस। द एक्शन ऑफ one individual or a group of them may prove harmful to others. As I discussed it in the last lecture. It was called an externality. These are known as externalities. The presence of externalities imposes costs upon the society. Indeed, one of the standard arguments for regulation is that it economizes on transaction cost. जो किसी एक ग्रुप का, किसी एक बंदे का एक काम है या वो एक ऐसा काम करता है जिसका नुकसान होता है औरों को, तो उसमें फिर गवर्नमेंट की जो रेगुलेशन है वो काफ़ी मददगार साबित हो सकती है, काफ़ी फ्रूटफुल साबित हो सकती है। व्हाट वुड बी एन एग्जांपल? वी हैव डिस्कस्ड दिस बिफोर। I gave you the example of the pollution in the Margila Hills and what they were doing with it, and what the companies are doing, and that pollution that has caused a lot of problems for people, like lung infections. So if now the government, what it can do over here and what it has failed to do up till now, is that they could regulate, in fact make that activity stop over there and regulate further activity so that no harm comes to the people's way. Now private sector पे अगर आपने ये काम छोड़ दिया तो वो तो बिल्कुल ही कुछ नहीं करेगी, क्योंकि प्राइवेट सेक्टर ही उधर है जो कि ये माइनिंग का काम कर रहा है, तो और माइनिंग और वहाँ पे इंडस्ट्रियल एक्टिविटी कर रहा है, तो यू डोंट एक्सपेक्ट देम टू स्टॉप. You would expect government to enforce it. Government has the authority to enforce its decisions. ये हुकूमत करेगी, private sector नहीं करेगा. So in this case, government is stepping in to economize on transaction costs. What's the transaction cost in this case? The cost of healthcare. It could be prevented by the government if they impose certain regulations upon the working of the private sector in those hills. There are several particular categories of market failures. We have regulations designed to mitigate the extent of externalities. These include zoning restrictions, environmental restrictions. ये मुख्तलिफ किस्म की restrictions, zoning restrictions होती हैं, ये शहरों के लिए होती हैं कि zone बना दिए, या फिर industry के लिए होती हैं, industrial zones होती हैं कि इससे बाहर नहीं होगी, इसके अंदर ही होगी. Environmental regulations designed to maintain competition and to ensure that natural monopolies do not abuse their monopoly position. Monopolies की regulation होगी. एक अलग बात है कि अगर हुकूमत ने खुद ही अपने इदारों को monopoly बनाया हो, लेकिन हम just for the sake of argument we are saying that for the purpose of maintaining competition and to eradicating monopolies, government can always step in and regulate this business. बाहर ममालिक में एंटी कंपटीशन कमीशंस हैं और एंटी मोनोपोली कमीशंस हैं, एंटी मोनोपोली कमीशन हैं जो कि मोनोपोली के तोड़ने के लिए ख़ास तौर पे वो लोग काम करते हैं. एंड देयर आर न्यूमरस जजमेंट्स, देयर आर सर्टेन लॉज ओवर देयर दैट हैव टू बी फॉलोड so that monopolies don't form and monopolies don't cause harms. What the usual way they do it is that they break up the monopoly into certain pieces and that they are owned by other people, not by the same person who owned the monopoly. So they compete with each other. That is what happens. In Pakistan we have a competition commission too, which deals with these kind of issues, and it has been doing good work, let me tell you. So there are some institutions in Pakistan, there are some places in Pakistan that are doing good work. Competition Commission of Pakistan is one of them. If you get the time, do go on their website and you can download a few reports what they've been doing, and it's amazing. It's very interesting, if not amazing. It's intriguing. You'll get to learn a lot from it. How competition works, how anti-monopoly practices are carried out, laws are carried out. There is a large set of regulations aimed at protecting consumers in areas like financial services, food safety, etc. So the crux of this kind of argument is that government regulates for a certain, it has a certain aspect in mind, it has a certain target in mind when it talks about regulations. When it wants to enforce regulations, there is something in their mind that they are aiming at. Information is a public good. All individuals want to be assured that if they put money in a bank will be there when it comes to when time comes for them for withdrawing their money anytime. In many instances, private sector tries to hold on to that information from the public. Private sector is not very good at providing or transparent information. Neither is the government sector. Pakistan में तो government sector का भी यही हाल है, वो information छुपाने की कोशिश करते हैं या गलत बताने की कोशिश करते हैं. Previous lectures में जिससे पहले lectures हो चुके हैं उनमें मैंने आपको एक मिसाल दी कि किस तरह वहाँ पे figure fudging होती है, यानी नंबरों को तब्दील किया जाता है कि जी बस देख लें सब कुछ अच्छा है, लेकिन in reality शायद वो इस तरह का होता नहीं है. काफ़ी दफ़ा ऐसा होता है. अगर प्राइवेट सेक्टर ने यहाँ पे इस मामले में इट इज़ गिल्टी, देन गवर्नमेंट सेक्टर जो है वो उससे ज़्यादा गिल्टी है, उससे ज़्यादा गुनाहगार है इस मामले में. Anyway, that was we heard about the establishment of a central bank in a podcast. recall that podcast about this establishment of the Federal Reserve in the United States. That was a public policy option too. That was the result of weakness in the private markets rather than the government's fault. Private banks, they were failing, and in many instances it had happened that they failed. There was a bank run, and it had adverse effects upon the economy, the output of the economy, the real activity. So what the government did was that it was not that they just certainly had an intuition. उनको अचानक एक ख्याल आया कि एक सेंट्रल बैंक होना चाहिए. नहीं, ये प्राइवेट बैंक्स जो थे, यानी प्राइवेट सेक्टर, उसकी कुछ कमजोरियां थी जिसकी वजह से बैंक रन्स हुए, बैंक्स खत्म हो गए, जिसकी वजह से बहुत प्रॉब्लम्स क्रिएट हुए, जैसे कि अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट के, जॉबलेसनेस के. उस चीज़ को टेक केयर करने के लिए, उस वीकनेस को टेक केयर करने के लिए हुकूमत ने सेंट्रल बैंक को कायम करने का फैसला किया अमेरिका में. और किसी भी मुल्क का सेंट्रल बैंक देख ले, वो उनमें से जो बड़े पर्पसेस होते हैं सेंट्रल बैंक के, उनमें से एक यही पर्पस है कि जो इस तरह के बैंक रन्स हैं उनको जो है वो फ्यूचर में ना हो और इस तरह के मसाइल पैदा ना हो. सो thus the government's intervention became necessary. Government's intervention by default, कोई था ही नहीं. प्राइवेट सेक्टर जो है वो खुद कभी करीब नहीं आया. उन्होंने कभी अपने प्राइवेट बैंक्स जो हैं प्राइवेट सेक्टर में, वो कभी भी ऐसा नहीं हुआ. पाकिस्तान की तारीख आप उठा के देख लें, दुनिया की एक तारीख उठा के देख लें इक्तिसादी, pick up economic history, and you wouldn't find an instance where the private sector got together and said that let us establish a central bank so that bank runs won't happen. No, they never did that. So government had to step in by default. Irrationality. We've touched upon this before in a previous lecture. Yes, I just discussed irrationality in this lecture too, okay, what it means. The standard comparative equilibrium model assumed that all individuals are rational in their decision making. It explains why rational individuals, households interacting with profit or value maximizing firms in a competitive marketplace might not result in Pareto efficient allocations. You don't need to care about what Pareto efficiency is. We will be discussing it in one of the next lectures, but Pareto efficiency basically is that you make someone better off, then while at the same time you are not making anybody worse off. That's Pareto efficiency. Pareto efficiency ये कहती है कि एक बंदा जिसकी हालत बेहतर हो जाती है किसी पब्लिक पॉलिसी की वजह से, तो फिर पब्लिक पॉलिसी को ये करना चाहिए. Pareto efficiency का क्राइटेरिया ये है कि उस पब्लिक पॉलिसी के तहत अगर एक बंदे या दो बंदों की या एक ग्रुप की हालत बेहतर हो रही है तो उसका किसी को नुकसान भी नहीं पहुंचना चाहिए, किसी को नुकसान भी नहीं पहुंचना चाहिए, तो फिर वो Pareto efficient पॉलिसी होगी. डिस्कस करेंगे आगे, उसके ग्राफिकल एनालिसिस भी करेंगे आने वाले लेक्चर्स में, घबराइए नहीं. But individuals may not be rational and may deviate from rationality in systematic ways. We've discussed this before. Again, rationality ज़रूरी नहीं है कि जो guesses लोग लगाते हैं, ज़रूरी नहीं है कि मैं अब जो मेरा जो एक्सपीरियंस है मेरे ख्याल में कि जो फ्यूचर में होना है, मैंने एक गेस लगाया हुआ है कि मेरा इतना खर्चा होना है क्योंकि इससे पहले मेरा इतना होता रहा है. ज़रूरी नहीं है कि मैं सही हूँ. अक्सर औकात ऐसा होता है. इनफैक्ट this is reality and I'm telling you this is something a personal experience कि there are uncertain events, unexpected events. बहुत से events ऐसे होते हैं जो मैं expect नहीं कर रहा होता. महीने के शुरू में, महीने के आखिर में, महीने के दरमियान में ऐसे events हो जाते हैं जिसमें मज़ीद खर्चा करना पड़ता है. तो उसमें फिर rationality जो है वो उसका वो और जो उसके rationality के तहत जो एक logical हम लोगों ने एक वो बनाया होता है कि इसी तरह होगा, इससे ज़्यादा नहीं होगा, that tends to go into the background, and that tends to be wrong. Individuals and even more so societies sometimes end up making a bad decision and have to be saved from themselves. बहुत से दफ़ा ऐसे भी होता है कि societies collectively make a bad decision. They don't make a good decision and then they rationality or governments, it is the government's intervention that has to make the things better, which society or the group of people or people have made bad for themselves. Probably we'll study a few examples of that in the future lectures, but not right now. Until the recent work on behavioral economics, economists, you have heard of behavioral economics by now, Richard Taylor's article. Economists typically looked with suspicion at such arguments for government intervention. But insights from behavioral economics has changed these views. अच्छा, अभी तक एक जो बिहेवियरल इकोनॉमिक्स का जब तक ये फील्ड अभी इन्वेंट नहीं हुई थी और इसके रिजल्ट सामने आना नहीं शुरू हुए थे, जिस तरह रिचर्ड टेलर की बुक आई, कैस सनस्टाइन की बुक आई, जो कि एक बड़ी हिट रही, और उसमें प्रैक्टिकल एप्लीकेशंस बताई गई कि बिहेवियर की जो ऑब्जर्व किया जाता है उसको फिर इकोनॉमिक्स में कितनी इंपॉर्टेंस है, क्यों है, और किस तरह इसको यूज किया जा सकता है फॉर पॉलिसी मेकिंग डिसीजन। उस वक्त तक अभी तक जो है कोई एक बहुत ज्यादा कोई स्ट्रॉन्ग एविडेंस, एक स्ट्रॉन्ग बेसिस नहीं थी, कोई ये नहीं कहता था, कोई इंसाइट नहीं थी कि क्यों हुकूमत का इसमें नेसेसरी है इंटरवेंशन। देयर वाज एविडेंस, यस, लेकिन अब ये एक नया एविडेंस आया है विच हैज चेंज लॉट कि गवर्नमेंट्स हेल्प और गवर्नमेंट्स इंटरवेंशन कैन बी यूजफुल। देयर वाज एविडेंस बिफोर in the form of qualitative and quantitative studies, but this one behavioral approach, this has really helped. Let's see how. Individuals may in some sense be better off if they are compelled to undertake some actions. A drug addict may realize that he may be tempted to consume these toxic products and then become addicted. He therefore wants the government or someone else to make it impossible, or at least more difficult to become addicted. Or the government can easily compel him through laws to force to stop using it. देखिए, इसमें दो बातें हो सकती हैं। हम मिसाल के तौर पर यहाँ पे एक ड्रग एडिक्ट की बात की, ये मसलन हेरोइन वगैरह नशे के आदी जो लोग हैं, इनको यू कांट एक्सपेक्ट देम टू बी रैशनल। अगर वो रैशनल इतने ही होते तो वो ये चीज़ें इस्तेमाल ही ना करते। दे विल कीप यूजिंग एंड दे नो दैट टू। इतने वो होशियार है कि उन्हें पता है कि हम इसके बगैर अब रह नहीं सकते, लेकिन इतना भी उनको पता है कि जब तक हुकूमत कोई बज़ोर-ए-बाज़ इस चीज़ों को नहीं रोकेगी, इस पर स्ट्रिक्ट एक्शन नहीं लेगी, तो ये चीज़ चलती रहेगी और फैल जाएगी। इन दिस केस आप ये देख सकते हैं कि हुकूमत की रेगुलेशन जो है, हुकूमत की इन्वॉल्वमेंट जो है और हुकूमत की एक चीज़ को फोर्स करना वो कितनी मुस्बत साबित हो सकती है। इट कुड बी वेरी गुड। In general, 5 interrelated reasons for government intervention are as follows. ये इंटर रिलेटेड रीजन है। अगेन इस चीज़ को हम जनरलाइज कर रहे हैं, कैटेगरी बना रहे हैं इसकी कि ये देखें ये रीजंस हैं, अगर इनको फॉलो किया जाए तो ये जो है इससे गवर्नमेंट इंटरवेंशन जो है उसकी एक बेसिस बनती है। वो क्या है? नंबर 1, इंश्योरिंग कॉम्पिटिशन। नंबर 2, प्रोटेक्टिंग कंज्यूमर्स। Number 3, ensuring the safety and soundness of financial institutions and financial system. Number 4, ensuring access to information and ensuring transparency. And number 5, promoting macro stability and growth. Now remember, these are the general criteria. There is so much covered under it. It's again, economics itself is such a vast subject that you cannot limit it to only these 5 assumptions, the general assumptions. You have to go beyond that. We have to see what happens. We have to see what's inside these assumptions, what is covered under these assumptions, and there is a world of it that is covered under these assumptions. But these are the generalized forms that one can cite for that necessitate the government's intervention in the economy. The list includes concerns both about efficiency and equity. Without government regulation, certain groups may not have access to finance and may be exploited. अच्छा, इसमें दोनों चीज़ें आ जाती है, एफिशिएंसी एंड इक्विटी। एफिशिएंसी जो है वो स्ट्रिक्टली ये है कि क्राइटेरिया प्रोडक्टिविटी पे कि कितना एफिशिएंट एक चीज़, रिसोर्सेज को कितने एफिशिएंटली यूज़ किया जा रहा है। इक्विटी जो होती है वो डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन पे आती है कि रिसोर्सेज जो है डजेंट मैटर कि कौन उसको कितना एफिशिएंटली यूज़ कर रहा है। ज़रूरी नहीं है कि जो सबसे एफिशिएंट है रिसोर्सेज के यूज़ में उसी के पास रिसोर्सेज है। इक्विटी का ये मतलब है कि जिसके पास नहीं है रिसोर्सेज उसके पास भी जाने चाहिए। I talked about cash transfers through income support program and programs like Zakat Anushar over here. So if it were only for the efficiency criteria, what you would have is that lot of poor people would have been in a lot of trouble without this kind of help. Efficiency criteria states that whoever is very good at using money, they should have the money. And of course, the best amongst us who use the money, the best are usually investors, savvy investors, institutional investors and individual investors. But we all are not investors. Poor people are not investors in the sense that other people are. So what is happening over here is that it's not just efficiency, it's also about equity that we are talking about. So it's about distributing the resources a bit more evenly than what has been happening before, or what would happen under efficiency, in fact. So we have to keep both of these criteria in conception, in public policy analysis. We have to look at both of these criteria in order to make a good public policy. There are many ways in which the government can deal with shortcomings in the market. Some of them are as follows: laws and regulations. While we typically think of regulation in areas of environment, safety, banking, utilities, many of other laws affecting economic activity can be looked at through a regulatory lens. Bankruptcy laws restrict the set of contracts and parties can draw up with each other. No matter what the contract may say about what happens in the event that a debtor cannot meet its obligations, bankruptcy law will prevail if those provisions are in conflict. Similarly, corporate governance laws restrict how corporations may govern themselves. So you have these laws and regulations which ensure laws and regulations promulgated by the government. You expect the government to promulgate those laws that ensure that the transaction costs that a society faces are not that great, or they are minimized. मैंने आपको अगेन इसमें एग्जांपल दी होगी बैंक्रप्सी लॉज जो होते हैं, जो कि गवर्नमेंट ने इन्फोर्स किए हुए हैं बहुत से ममालिक में, वो प्रोटेक्ट करने के लिए जो एक कंज्यूमर बैंक्रप्ट हो जाता है जिसने कर्जा लिया हुआ है, या फिर बैंक्स को भी प्रोटेक्ट करते हैं कि जिसने कर्जा नहीं दिया तो उससे किसी तरह कर्जा निकलवाने की कोई एक लॉफुल ग्राउंड हो कि वो कर्जा दे, किसी तरीके से किस्तों में दे दे, कि बाद में दे दे. लेकिन ये लॉज हैं, ये एक दूसरे को प्रोटेक्ट करने के लिए, मुख्तलिफ लोगों को, मुख्तलिफ ग्रुप्स को प्रोटेक्ट करने के लिए, इस केस में बैंक्स और कंज्यूमर्स दोनों को प्रोटेक्ट करने के लिए. सो these are enacted by the government in order to make it easier for everybody. Greenhouse discussion, greenhouse gas emissions. Did the private sector came up with any good solution or solution at all? No, but we will discuss it in the coming lectures. Not right now. For the moment, it is quite enough. In this particular lecture, we went through some of the rationales of the government's intervention in the economy, and then we also went through the basics of demand and supply. I hope you've got a good grasp of it by now and covered the theory as well. Till the next time, the next lecture, Allah Hafiz, and have a good time.